Thank you. Further debate? The honourable member for Welland.
I commend the author of this bill for bringing it forward. It permits a discussion around a very important issue that we have. I, like everybody else in this chamber, I trust everybody else believes in the right, the constitutional right of any working woman or man to belong to a trade union and to freely collectively bargain. I know that the Liberal government doesn't want to extend that right to agricultural workers, but they have to live with that. I also believe very, very strongly that the right to withdraw labor is a critical part of living in a democratic society. And again, it's another right that's a constitutional right. It's a right that's protected by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And so is the right to picket. Now, I understand that homes, group living residences, as described in the bill, are people's homes. They're also people's workplaces. I also understand, I hope all of us do, that the people working in those supported group living residences are amongst the lowest paid workers in Ontario. I was impressed with the material put together by Community Living Ontario. Their material behind closed doors, published by Community Living Ontario. And I read the commentaries of people whose first names are referred to, and I'm concerned about some of the upset that these people endured. I'm concerned that there are reports of presumably a worker on a picket line striking a strobe into someone's bedroom. I find that deplorable behavior. And that's the sort of thing, a former criminal lawyer, I suppose one never is a former criminal lawyer. Once a criminal lawyer, always a criminal lawyer, which is an appropriate profession for entering politics, of course. But I recall as a criminal lawyer that the charge of mischief, which is not a trivial charge, it sounds trivial, but a charge of mischief would be an appropriate criminal charge for somebody who did something like that, flashing a strobe into somebody's bedroom, disrupting their sleep, interfering with their use of their home. And I also know that no worker anywhere in this province ever goes on strike willingly or with any delight or pleasure, especially low-wage workers. You see, because a low-wage worker suffers even more when they lose a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks of wages. I'm also touched by the comment in the material in behind closed doors about how little some of our friends who are living in group living residences, how little they receive by way of ODSP. There was one comment here, and again, I find it quite sympathetic, who says, look, these guys are going on strike for better wages. I live on $32 a week. I understand that. And people should know that we've been in this legislature aggressively addressing this government about its failure to allow people, some of them living in supported group living residences, the dignity of decent incomes, the dignity of decent and real work, the dignity of being included in all facets of the community's life. And it's for all of those reasons that I can't support the legislation. It's for all of those reasons that I can't. Our friends who live in supported group living residences aren't those people. They're our neighbors. They're our sisters and brothers. They're our children. They're our parents. And you see, one of the realities of living in the community, heck, I can tell you nothing's more inconvenient than being in Winnipeg and expecting to get a flight home and finding airline pilots on strike. I found that a serious inconvenience. So I took the train. And I wish the airline pilots well. You see, one of the questions here is, why are there strikes in the first instance? No worker wants to walk a picket line when that worker would far sooner negotiate a collective bargaining agreement at the bargaining table. So I say all of the players here aren't laid out on the table. If we had anti-scab legislation in this province, like we used to until it was repealed, picket lines would be few and far between, and labour disputes would be far more quickly settled and resolved. If we had adequate funding, for programs run by ACL, amongst others, Association for Community Living, amongst others, then you wouldn't have the tensions that inevitably are going to occur every time collective bargaining comes around, because those lowest paid workers in the province could expect to have their plea for a modest 2% a year, whatever it might be, increase in their salary or wages accommodated. We New Democrats believe in collective bargaining. We believe in the right to withdraw labour. We believe in the right of people not to be harassed or intimidated. And that's why I don't understand for the life of me why we haven't heard stories about applications for civil injunctions, enjoining people on picket lines from doing any number of these things that have been complained about. I really wish that the people who did some of these things that are complained about, screaming at people who live in homes that are group living residences, flashing lasers, I really wish they'd be named and outed right here in this chamber, because they deserve to be, if in fact they exist. So while I respect the author of this bill, and I am well aware of her good intentions when it comes to caring for people in her community, I say that as a Canadian who believes very much in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, as a Canadian who believes in the rule of law, as a Canadian who believes in free collective bargaining, as a Canadian who believes in the right of labour to withdraw their labour, and as a Canadian who believes in the power and the right of courts to intervene when public harm is being done by way of injunctions, I say this does not address the problem, certainly doesn't solve the problem, and I'm afraid that it in and of itself as an issue will aggravate and inflame rather than encourage accord.
Further debate? The honourable member for Brant.
Thank you, Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on Bill 83, an act to prevent picketing of supported group living residences. Let me get to the point. I believe the stories that I've been told in my writing. I believe the residences when they tell me things happened to their home that they didn't want to have happen and they didn't like, and it threw them off and it confused them and they were disappointed. I believe those stories. I want to say to the member opposite who's introducing the bill, the spirit in which you're providing it is laudable. The spirit in which you're providing it is a statement to who we are and how we treat each other. I don't want to make a distinction between anyone that needs special help, but how we treat each other. The member from Welland offers some sound advice when it comes to outing the individuals who perpetrated some of these things that happened to the constituents in my riding and to the ridings across the province that had the same experiences during that strike. So I want to stand firmly by saying to you, I honestly believe the stories that I heard. I also want to provide you with a concern that I have about the wording of the bill, and I'll be very specific. If we turn to page 1 and look at section 3, prohibiting picketing, number 3, despite any other act, a person shall not, in connection with a labour dispute, engage in picketing of a supported group living residence. The first part is what I will be, and I believe you will be, having trouble with in court, despite any other act. And what I offer you, hopefully maybe in amendment, is the labour law challenges that took place previously when a section similar to that was used to describe no other bill can supersede this one. It turned out it was the other way around. The labour law can't be superseded in somebody that's trying to circumvent what labour law already states. So I offer that as a friendly guidance to find out if there's a way to get that clarified. The Ontario Labour Relations Act of 1995, the LRA, neither defines nor expressly authorizes or regulates picketing in the context of a legal strike. So picketing is lawful at common law, but may be limited if it involves criminal or quasi-criminal activities such as trespassing or tortious activity such as nuisance, intimidation, inducing breach of contract or defamation. Generally, picketing in Ontario is regulated through three means. Court injunctions. Courts have the power to regulate picketing through injunctions issued under Sections 101, 102 of the Courts of Justice Act, the CJA. Injunctions may be sought by workplace parties or even third parties. Injunctions in the context of labour disputes are addressed explicitly in Section 102. Section 102 of the CJA requires that prior to issuing an injunction, the court be satisfied that reasonable efforts to obtain police assistance with respect to alleged danger or damage to property, injuries to persons, obstructions to lawful entry or exit from the premises, or the breach of peace have been unsuccessful. The Labour Board orders, which is the third option. Under Section 100 and 101 of the LRA, the Ontario Labour Relations Board has the jurisdiction to regulate picketing activity in the context of a legal strike or lockout. Board remedies may be sought by the employer or the unions involved in the workplace dispute. I wanted to make sure that we are on record of what I think is the practical application of our discussion this afternoon. So the focus is always on getting the parties back to the table to reach a negotiated settlement. And for the record, 97% of all labour disputes were successfully worked out without a work stoppage. We are talking specifically about the context of this bill specific to community living. So I want to say to you, I've been a volunteer and worked with Community Living Brant for even before I was elected, and indicate to you that right off the bat, a very important issue that needs to be raised today is the value that we must place on those that have provided the service for those that need our help. I do not in any way, shape or form believe that the workers under these circumstances are collectively should be painted with any brush that these pickets have brought attention to. So I want to make it clear that on the workers' behalf, I want to be on the record as indicating I have seen since 1992 exemplary work being done by the citizens that are employed by the community living. I also want to thank the staff and the supervisors of community living for the exemplary work that they do. So I think in terms of what we're trying to accomplish is to eradicate that percent of problems that took place during a time in which these stories were told. I agree with the member. I agree that these things should not have happened. And I believe that we should be doing something in order to stop that from happening. I'm going to continue to listen carefully to the debates that's going on today, and I, for one, during private members' time, will use my right to choose which way I want to vote. And I will share that vote when it comes time for that. Thank you, Speaker.